The 6th generation BMW M3 is the fastest, the most sophisticated, and arguably the most desirable car ever added to this distinguished race-bred model line. Like its almost identically engineered M4 competition coupe counterpart, this G80 series design keeps an enhanced version of the classic straight 6 engine configuration, but much is also different, primarily with the option of all-wheel drive for the first time. This car has evolved.
So, here we are at the end of an era. This is the 6th generation version of BMW's M3, and almost certainly the last one that'll be made with an internal combustion engine. Whatever appears after this, with M3 badging, will never be quite the same. But in many ways, the M3 is already very different from the car enthusiasts once knew. This G80 series version certainly doesn't have much in common with the 1986 era E30 original in terms of either power, size or subtlety. But then with a 35-year gap between the two models, you'd expect that. More surprising perhaps is the extent of the changes over this car's F80 series predecessor. Compared to that car, this M3 is now 123mm longer, 60 horsepower more powerful, and perhaps most significantly, most versions of it will be sold with four-wheel drive. This last evolutionary element is perhaps the most significant. For some enthusiasts, offering an M3 without rear-wheel drive is as heretical as selling a Porsche 911 with an engine in the front. It had to come, though. The output of this car spiraled to over 500 horsepower, 510 to be exact, which is the output of the competition spec variant, the only version of this G80 series M3 which will be imported into the UK. That's an awful lot to be putting through the rear wheels on a typical damp British B road, which is why 80% of M3 sales going forward will be of models with the xDrive system. As with the previous generation model, this M3 shares all its engineering and its front of cabin design with the alternative M4 coupe variant, but the two models, built in different factories, have slightly different buying demographics. The M4 is your alternative to an uncompromised sports car, but this M3, which in this production run will be offered also in touring estate form, is a touch more subtle, and it has a badge with a deeper heritage behind it. One that evokes a rich history of competition, tyre smoke and unremitting motorsport development over 4 decades and 5 generations of this Munich maker's practical, power-packed performance car. So, is this G80 series version fit to wear this famous badge? The industry's most comprehensive road test film, Car and Driving's Review, will give you the answers. Quite an engine, isn't it? Straight 6, of course, as usual in an M3. Throughout most of its history, this model line has been primarily linked with straight 6 power. The early E36 second generation M3 of 92 and the E46 third generation model of 2000 both had that in normally aspirated form. Then, after a brief dalliance with a 4-litre V8 with the 4th generation E90 M3 of 2007, the brand's more usual 3-litre straight 6 returned 7 years later in this current car's F80 predecessor, this time with twin turbos. We get a developed version of that 3-litre power plant in this Mark 6 model, an engine known in Munich as the S58, which in this M3 competition model puts out 510 HP. That should be enough for a few Bavarian fireworks, shouldn't it? Behind the wheel, it's all a very long way from those earlier M3s in terms of the complexity of the dash displays and the menu options you're faced with. But the satisfying twin tailpipe burble you get after jabbing this red starter button on the transmission tunnel will be familiar if you've long followed this model line. And so will the urgent forward thrust which accompanies a flex of your right foot. There's an instancy of response which very few turbocharged engines can deliver, and that continues as you power through the rev range. This is despite BMW's decision here to replace the old F80 series model's theoretically quicker shifting double clutch DCT auto transmission with this G80 version's more conventional torque converter ZF8 speeder. There's no manual gearbox this time around, well, not for our market anyway, but you can still give yourself plenty of transmission chores if you choose not to use this M Steptronic Sport Drive Logic gearbox as a conventional automatic. Switch instead to a sequential setting, and that'll allow you to make all the changes yourself, either with this stick or with these lovely tactile steering wheel mounted paddle shifters. And there's also the option to vary the ferocity of the shift speed using this Drive Logic button at the base of the gear stick, via which you'll be able to access 3 distinct setups: comfort orientated, sports focused, or track optimized. Cog swapping used to be crucial with M3s. With models in the first 4 generations, you had to keep the naturally aspirated engine spinning, and with this Mark 6 model's twin-turbo predecessor, there was a slight lag that you had to allow for before the blowers spooled up. Here there's none of that. With 650 Newton meters of torque on tap, you just plant your foot down in almost any gear and it goes, all the way to the 7,200 RPM red line. It's very, very fast too, especially from rest, where with the assistance of launch control, 62 is crested in just 3.9 seconds on the way to a top speed of 155 miles an hour, or 180 if the optional M Pro package is specified. All that's with the rear-driven version of this model, which is a couple of tenths quicker to 62 than its direct Mark V F80 predecessor, as you'd expect, given that this replacement car has 100 Newton meters more pulling power. And as the revs rise, the soundtrack builds, especially if you've engaged the active sports exhaust, whose note is authentically embellished through the stereo system speakers. That soundtrack is one of the things that you can control via this center console setup button or the center stack display's selectable M menu. Either way, you get a screen that allows you to tailor your preferred drive settings and store your 2 most favored combinations behind these little red M1 and M2 tabs on the steering wheel. One perhaps for commuting, and the other maybe for your favorite back road. Now you can alter parameters for engine, for transmission and steering, plus there are also 3 chassis options for the suppleness of the adaptive M suspension with its electronically controlled damping. And there are 2 pedal feel settings for the freshly developed M compound brakes, with M carbon ceramic stoppers as before remaining optional for those with bottomless bank accounts. Braver folk can use the M menu to deactivate the DSC traction system and dial in a lesser level of stability intervention via the provided 10-stage slider tool. In addition to all that, you'll want to play with this center console M mode button, which offers road, sport and track settings, each of which changes the instrument display and also the level of drive assistance system intervention. So this M3 is quick, and there are lots of selectable modes which allow you to set it up much as a professional driver would set up his race car. You probably expected that. What is different here though is the way that you can use all that speed and motorsport tamed tech. Even on dry tarmac, previous versions of this model needed care when pushing on hard over favourite bumpy secondary roads. Not only if you were to avoid a trip to the magistrate's court, but also if you were going to avoid a trip through the nearest hedge. This Mark 6 version does still feel pretty firm, especially at lower speeds, and it still requires a keen sense of responsibility if you were to exercise it fully, but it's a big step forward in terms of its composure over undulations or mid-corner tarmac tears. Perhaps that has something to do with the 170 kilos of extra weight that's been added this time around. Not that you necessarily really feel that. Aided by its stiffer body shell, this G80 series car almost, but not quite, delivers an M2 style level of agility. You'd struggle to believe that until you experience it. Nevertheless, a 1.8 ton M3 does really seem a long way from the stripped out lightweight ethos that once was supposed to characterize this model line, the kind of thing that purists still reminisce about. BMW though doesn't build M3s for the purists anymore, which is just as well, because if they did, this car wouldn't have the turbo engine that makes possible all that prodigious output, or the proper modern electric steering rack, which makes possible all the electronic safety features which allow you to use all that power in some reasonable safety. Instead, with each new model in the line, the brand has always chosen to prioritize what it thinks its increasingly well-heeled customers are looking for at that moment in time. That, in this case, explains why our market isn't getting the manual gearbox and non-competition spec 487 horsepower versions of this car that you can buy in mainland Europe. It also explains why there'll be a Touring Estate M3 model this time around, along with a convertible version of the mechanically identical M4 Competition Coupe, and M Competition variants of the company's X3 and X4 SUVs with exactly the same ballistic 510 horsepower straight-six powertrain, which of course pair it with xDrive four-wheel drive. Yes, four-wheel drive. Well, that's another thing the purists will disapprove of as part of the evolution that's brought you this G80 design. You don't have to have it. Here, for example, we've stuck with the rear-driven model, but going forward, 8 out of 10 M3s will be sold in xDrive form, and we can understand why. Opting for the extra cost tractional package makes a G80 series car the first M3 that you could drive hard year-round on UK roads. Yet you can also still configure this BMW for those occasions when you want a more rear-driven feel. The xDrive system distributes power between the front and rear wheels via a transfer case with an electronically controlled multi-plate clutch before a clever active M differential splits it again between the two rear wheels. The extra traction significantly enhances acceleration from standstill, and it reduces the 62 miles an hour sprint time to 3.5 seconds. And the driver can configure the distribution of power as required via a provided setup menu. This has a default four-wheel drive setting for unshakable traction and precisely controllable handling, or a four-wheel drive sport mode, which directs a greater proportion of the engine's torque to the rear wheels to optimize track performance. Switching off the DSC stability system brings a further two-wheel drive mode into the equation with no intervention from the control system at all. All of which means that on an xDrive equipped M3, just as with this more traditional rear-driven layout, tail-out tyre smoking slides on track days remain a tantalising possibility for expert drivers. These are people who love the M-Drive professional package built into this G80 series model. A key element of this is BMW's M-Drift Analyzer, which at speed around a circuit records the amount of oversteer and opposite lock that the driver's been able to engage. And if all you want to do is burn away this car's expensive Michelin Pilot Sport 4S rubber with tyre smoking drifts, it'll record your next and best drifts in terms of seconds, yards and angle. You can even manage these without necessarily turning off the DSC stability intervention if you tap this center console button and engage M Dynamic mode, which allows for a greater degree of wheel slip. The M-Drive Professional package also includes an M lap timer, data from which can be analysed in detail via the M lap timer app, which Apple phone users can download. For this 6th generation M3, BMW has also redesigned the cooling and oil supply systems specially for track use. Whether all of this is enough to create in this G80 series model the best ever track-ready M3 is another question, of course. Probably not. The bulkier curb weight might tell against this car in extremis, but what's not in doubt at all is that it's easily the best ever road-ready M3. The things that were always good about this car, the low centre of gravity and the perfect 50-50 weight distribution, are now enhanced by a longer wheelbase, a wider track, a stiffer body, a more engaging engine and a whole stack of extra technology. All of which has made this more capable M3 more involving, yet at the same time somehow less intimidating. It's quite an achievement, and this is quite a car. Every M3 enthusiast has an opinion on this G80 series model's divisive front grille. We'll leave you to form yours with a proviso that a proper judgment requires a proper viewing in the metal, in your spec, with your colours and your trim, at which point you might find your initial perception changing a bit. What we can say with certainty though here is that for the first time in history, the M3 has a front end look that's distinct from the 3 Series it's based on, and that ends a 35-year tradition with this model line. This is a slightly bigger car than before, 122mm longer, 26mm wider and 8mm higher. That's in the saloon form. At the time of this test, in summer 2021, BMW had just announced that a touring estate body style would also be made available with this 6th generation model. Here though, our attention is on this sedan, which like its predecessor, features this classy carbon fibre plastic reinforced roof with 2 lengthwise rails that optimise airflow. Other distinctive design touches are plentiful. These traditional M gills and the side panels, for example, and the M-specific door mirrors with their aerodynamically optimised contouring, which are offered either in high gloss black or, as here, in carbon fibre. One of the most striking profile features is this extended lower side sill, which together with the attachment parts for the front and rear aprons forms a high gloss black band around the whole of the car. You'll also note the prominently flared wheel arches, which have incorporated air curtain inner lining slits at the front and tiny aerodynamic spats at the rear. These arches house 19-inch rims at the front and 20 inches at the rear. We have the optional 825 series M double-spoke Orbit grey matte alloy rims with mixed tyres here, which can be had with blue or black M brake calipers if you don't like these standard red ones. Other rim choices are also available, as are stickier track tyres. Of course, there's plenty of menacing overtaking presence. The contour bonnet has indentations either side of the central crease, and that flows down into that controversial grille, either side of which are additional cooling intakes, which, as here, can also be trimmed with carbon fibre. Further up, smeared into the corner of the car, are these Shadowline LED headlights with darkened inlays adorning their upper edges. Here, the blue beam highlights signal that they've been embellished with piercing BMW laser light technology. At the rear, darkened full LED light clusters with L-shaped tail lamps sit below a neat rear spoiler with this distinctive central notch. Again, if you want something more distinctive than the high gloss black standard finishing, there's the option of carbon fibre trim for this, and for the potent looking lower diffuser, which features eye-catching fins which frame the exhaust system's pairs of tailpipes, each measuring 100mm in diameter. Right, let's take a seat inside. Now, what you don't want here is the feeling that you've just bought an M Sport trimmed 3 Series with ideas above its station. Well, the requirement for something a bit more bespoke certainly seems to have been recognised here. Some of the wilder colour schemes and spec options will certainly make the cabin feel that way. These optional race-style M carbon bucket seats certainly supply the DTM ambiance that some customers might want. Others will find them a touch pretentious maybe, but the cabin architecture surrounding all this tinsel is anything but. It's sensible, ergonomic, high quality, and based around the twin screens of BMW's familiar live cockpit professional setup. There's a thick M leather steering wheel, of course, complete with red accented M buttons for your favourite drive settings, and an embossed M stitched drive selector, along with interior trim strips in high gloss carbon fibre and an anthracite coloured headliner. The required sense of technology and luxury is provided by configurable LED interior lighting, a 16-speaker Harman Kardon hi-fi, and a head-up display, all of which delivers the required sense of occasion and quality. It's all just as good as anything you'll find in an M5. We mentioned screens earlier. The first of them is this 12.3-inch instrument display, which inevitably, but rather disappointingly, replaces the previous model's motorsport-derived dials. There's a choice of 3 display formats: Road, Sport and Track, and the easiest way to flip between them is to press this M mode button on the centre console. Road is the usual BMW setup with its opposite swinging needles. In this format, there's sat-nav mapping in the center of the display, but you can't expand the 3D navigation layout to completely fill the screen, as is possible with, say, the virtual cockpit layout of the rival Audi Rs4. Switch to the second sports screen format and you get instead a central, more focused display that sees your chosen gear selection and speed, flanked by vertical rev counter readouts. Plus you can customize what appears to the left of that graphic. There are tyre, engine data, G-meter and speed stat options. The final layout option, track, keeps much the same format but shows you the car's current M dynamic drive settings to the right of the display and turns off the center stack infotainment screen to avoid distraction. Anything else you need is likely to be located on this 10.25-inch center control display, which can do just about anything you might want, from changing engine settings to booking airline tickets and hotel rooms. The main area that you're going to want to focus on, though, is the selectable M menu section, which is where you're going to be configuring the drive settings for the little red M1 and M2 paddles on the steering wheel spokes. There are engine, transmission, chassis, steering, brake and DSC stability sections. Plus, there's a slider to vary the amount of M traction control intrusion, along with engine start-stop and sound control options. The M menu also allows you to configure the head-up display and the instrument cluster. Plus, it's also your access point for the M Drift Analyzer, which you can use on track days to show your next drift and best drift achievements in terms of seconds, yards and angle. Track heroes are going to love all that. Otherwise, it's all pretty much as you'd find in any other modern BMW model these days. This advanced infotainment package includes what the brand calls an intelligent personal assistant. Now, this is the supposed fount of all knowledge, which responds to voiced questions prefaced by "Hey BMW," much as the Alexa system or Siri on the Apple phone or the Google Assistant feature on an Android handset would. BMW insists that this setup is rather cleverer than those ones. You can give it a name if you think that'll help you bond with it better, and the press kit tells us that we can even ask it the meaning of life. It's a bit more likely, of course, they'll be using this to make day-to-day driving just a bit easier. If you tell it you're cold, it'll turn up the temperature. If you don't understand a particular feature, then it'll trot out some explanatory text from the online handbook. Or you might want to use it to check your oil level, look at fuel stations along your route, or read out your messages. This lower iDrive controller still sets the class standard for infotainment functionality. For example, it just takes a couple of nudges to set up just how much steering intervention you want out of the safety systems, or whether you want any of that at all. And the system will then remember your preference. Plus, if you're graduating on from the previous F80 generation M3 model, you'll be pleased to find that both the top of this capstan controller and the screen surface are now touch sensitive as standard. Plus, in an age where many rivals are dispensing with audio volume control knobs, we were very pleased to find one retained here. You'll quickly get to grips with the calm, measured graphics of the operating system 7.0 Monitor 2. The layout's clear and logical. A sidebar menu gives you media, communication, navigation, car and apps options, and those are also duplicated by buttons next to the iDrive controller. The shortcut options connect you into features like the DAB audio system, 4G LTE connectivity and connected sat-nav. All of this is standard fare. There's no respite inside here though from the divisive look of the front grille. If you don't happen to like that, a striking image of that appendage appears on the central screen whenever you alter the various individual drivetrain settings. There's an awful lot of connected drive digital stuff on this central screen too. A wide range of BMW vehicle apps, for example, which give you access to things like news reports and weather forecasts. And a concierge service, which connects you through to an operator to help with journeying information. Plus, the system can remotely update its own software, and there's also what BMW calls an open mobility cloud that, via a clever My BMW app, can allow you to interact with the car when you're not in it. For example, it allows you to remotely view it in 3D. There are caveats here though. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone integration, that's now standard without limit and not before time, but many of this Munich maker's digital services remain life limited before they become chargeable. Some for 3 years, and others like BMW Music, which brings your favourite soundtracks into the car, and Microsoft Office 365, which syncs in your emails and your calendar for just 3 months. To some extent, you can't help feeling that it's a case of the Munich maker giving with one hand and then taking away with the other. Buried away in this central screen are lots of little extra touches that you'll like. For example, the caring car feature, which uses music, lighting and the climate control in a 3-minute long session that'll either vitalise or relax you. We also like the way you can adjust the climate system's flow and temperature for different seats, driver, front passenger and second row. With the seat heating, you can adjust the amount of heat that's distributed to the seat back and the seat base. And there's also a climate control rules section, which allows you to set the system up so that heating for the seats and the steering wheel automatically comes on when the outside temperature drops below a certain level. What else do we need to tell you away from screens? Well, build quality is predictably faultless. Interestingly, this M3 model isn't screwed together alongside its M4 showroom stablemate at BMW's plant in Dingolfing. Instead, it rolls down the production lines of BMW plant Munich. As with an M4 though, you'll need to acquaint yourself with quite a lot of button functionality. Unlike most of its rivals, BMW still believes in buttons. We like that, but we can't say the same for those optional carbon shell race seats here. For a start, you might find the exaggerated bolsters a bit tight for comfort if you happen to be familiar with the offerings of Colonel Sanders. And whatever your size, getting in and out with these seats is irritatingly awkward. Plus, this ridge between your legs just feels odd. For the occasional day at Spa-Francorchamps, these chairs will be brilliant. For the rest of your ownership life, you'll wonder why on earth you shelled out more for them. Otherwise, everything's exactly as it would be on a well-specified 3 Series saloon. Maybe perhaps the M340i variant, in which you could have gone almost as fast for an awful lot less. The over-the-shoulder view is slightly restricted on this saloon model thanks to the wide rear pillars and the boot lid with a leading edge that's difficult to see, although this issue is somewhat mitigated by a whole bank of technology which will help you to slot into spaces, all-round parking sensors, a rear view camera and a parking assistant to steer you into tight bays. They're all standard, as is the reversing assistant, which automatically reverses you along whatever path you've previously taken forward. You can even add the optional drive recorder package that we have here. Now this uses the various driver assistance cameras all around the car to record and store video footage from different points around the vehicle. So if you ever should have an impact, then you'll be able to instantly watch it back and inwardly cringe. There's a reasonable level of cabin practicality. The door bins incorporate bottle holders and they're averagely sized. The glove box is mostly taken up by the owner's manual. That does seem a bit pointless actually, given that the entire manual is accessible via the infotainment screen. The lidded area here at the base of the centre stack reveals a couple of cup holders along with a 12-volt port and a USB-A point. Plus there's a wireless phone charging mat. USB-C point can be found in this lidded box between the seats here. An overhead sunglasses compartment, well, that is missing, but you do get a flock-lined cubby down by the driver's right knee and ticker clips on the sun visors. With these optional carbon bucket chairs, we never really worked out what this little carbon fibre tray in the central seat ridge is for. Ideal perhaps for your barbecue dip from the drive-through. Okay, time to check out the rear seat, an area which M3 drivers will rarely sit in, but which presumably must matter to them, otherwise they would have chosen an M4. Compared to the old F80 series model, the door aperture has been increased in height, which will help parents getting things like child seats in and out. and it'll be a fraction easier still on the M3 Touring Estate model that you can ask your dealer about. Given that this G80 generation M3 is now over 4.7 metres long for the first time, and it's pretty much as big as an M5 from the turn of the century, you'd expect things to have improved quite a lot back here. And sure enough, there's certainly more room to stretch out here than was the case with the previous generation model. The distance between the front and rear seats has been extended by 11 millimetres. There's slightly more headroom too than before, and BMW says that the cabin is now wide enough to take 3 child seats side by side, although only the 2 outside positions come with ISOFIX attachment points. Certainly feels a bit more spacious back here than it would be in a Mercedes-AMG C63 or an Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Surprisingly, BMW hasn't provided a central armrest. The only reason this middle part of the seat backrest can fall forward is to facilitate the long items being poked through from the cargo area. But rear seat folk are usually favoured with seat back pockets, not in these carbon fibre optional ones of course. Twin USB-C sockets are here, overhead reading lights too, coat hooks in the grab handles, and decently sized door pockets which incorporate bottle holders. You certainly get the kind of premium luxury feel you'd expect for the money being asked here, with classy stitched finishing and ambient lighting strips for the door cards and smart blue M flashing on the seat belts. There's also a 3-zone climate control system which allows rear seat folk to individually set their own temperature using the central display below these twin vents. Finally, let's take a look out back. This powered boot lid comes as part of the extra cost comfort package, but an electric tailgate is standard on the Touring Estate version. Both include a hands-free opening feature. The revealed trunk space on this sedan is the same size as it was before, 480 litres. That's the same as you'll get in the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, but 10 litres less than you get from a Mercedes-AMG C63. The Touring Estate version serves up 500 litres. The station wagon has a rear window that opens separately too, so smaller items are easier to load. In this saloon, the boot area is usefully square and deep, although it can't offer any further space beneath the floor. There are stowage compartments on the left and right with netting that can be slid aside if you want to use the additional space in those recessed areas to allow something quite long to be accommodated back here, width-wise, a bag of golf clubs, for example. There is a 12-volt socket on the right. You also get the 4 usual tie-down points, and the warning triangle is neatly incorporated into the inner side of the boot lid. What else? Well, the painted metal and exposed wiring of the boot's roof doesn't feel very premium, but in this area you do get useful catches for retracting the standard split folding backrest. It segments in the 40-20-40 fashion, so long items like skis can be pushed through without disturbing a couple of rear seated occupants. When the seats are completely folded in this saloon, you don't get a very flat loading area, but things will be much better in the touring variant, which with everything folded flat could offer you up to 1,500 litres of carriage space. Not so long ago, the M3 was a £40,000 car. It's very different today. BMW attached a price tag of just under £75,000 to this 6th generation G80 series model from launch, a car only to be sold in our market in its uprated competition spec form. That figures just £500 less than the alternative M4 competition coupe version, and it only gets you this car in rear-driven form. Around 80% of customers are expected to want the alternative X-Drive four-wheel drive version, which from launch was priced at a fraction over £77,000. At the time of this test in summer 2021, BMW told us it was planning to add an M3 Touring Estate body style to the range. And if you don't mind switching to M4 badging, there's also a convertible body shape for around £82,000. If you can afford even more, just over £85,000, then you can get the same 510 horsepower engine in M competition versions of BMW's X3 and X4 mid-sized SUVs. Before talking about rivals, we need to give you a BMW perspective on those figures and remind you that the next saloon model up in BMW's full M hierarchy, the M5 competition, now costs a fraction over £100,000. Yes, really, you can expect the next generation M2 competition coupe, which at the time of this test was still pounding BMW test tracks prior to launch, to cost significantly over £50,000. In short, M performance doesn't come cheap. Even if it lacks a combustion engine, the brand's i4 M50 GT style EV saloon, which is even quicker off the line than an M3, costs around £64,000. At the time of this 6th generation M3's launch in late 2020, direct long-term competitors were tricky to pin down. The closest one these days is Alfa Romeo's Giulia Quadrifoglio, which uses a 2.9-litre biturbo V6, developing the same 510 horsepower output as this M3. And with a £67,000 price tag at the time of this test, it offers a useful saving over this Munich model. This BMW's traditional arch rival has always been the Mercedes-AMG C63, but at the time of this G80 Series M3's launch, the second generation V8 version of that Merc was in its run-out phase, and it's due to be replaced by a third generation design with a 4-cylinder hybrid engine mating 449 bhp combustion power with a 204 HP electric motor and four-wheel drive, which gives you some idea of how cars in this segment are going to change over the next few years. What else? Well, the Audi Rs4, which lost its V8 engine back in 2012 and these days uses a 444 horsepower V6, costs just over £63,000 and only comes in Avant Estate form. The Maserati Ghibli is a saloon, but the closest comparable version of this M3, the Ghibli V6 Modena S, has only 430 horsepower. It can only be had in rear-driven form and it costs around £83,500 at the time of this test, so quite a lot more than the M3. No other brand is represented in the segment, but of course there are any number of fast SUVs. That's the sort of thing a traditional M3 customer isn't going to want at all, though. If, having considered all those various options, you conclude it is an M3 competition model that you really want, then you're going to need to know, of course, just how generous the brand has been with the standard spec to try to sugar the pill of that premium price tag. Well, there's lots of drive technology, of course, including an M Sport differential, M compound brakes with red calipers, and M Steptronic Sport Auto transmission with drive logic. BMW also includes its M Drive Professional package, developed for track driving, which includes an M Drift Analyzer and an M Lap Timer. Plus there's M Adaptive Suspension, the damper characteristics of which can be adjusted via the drive settings of the car's M Setup menu. The driver can select from 3 modes: Comfort, Sport and the track-focused Sport Plus. All settings also influence the note of the dual-branch Sports exhaust system. As for the exterior, well, of course, that gets a very distinct and bespoke look. You'll immediately notice the carbon-style roof. It's actually made of CFRP, carbon fibre reinforced plastic. And the M double-spoke bi-colour black alloy wheels, they also make a statement. They are 19 inches at the front and 20 inches at the back. You also get extended high-gloss shadow line exterior trim, aluminium door sills with M3 branding, a black high-gloss M rear lip spoiler, and black chrome exhaust tailpipe finishes. You also get LED headlights and sun protection glass. For the cabin, there are M Sport seats upholstered in black merino leather with illuminated M3 branding, an M Sport leather steering wheel, a gear shift lever with an embossed M badge, a carbon fibre interior trim and an anthracite headliner, and a bespoke version of BMW's head-up display, which is M-specific, just like the brand's sophisticated BMW Live Cockpit Professional arrangement. Now this gives you a large 10.25-inch centre dash screen and an even bigger 12.3-inch control display to replace the conventional dials in the instrument cluster. Plus, of course, as you'd expect for the money being asked here, you get a full roster of luxury segment features, acoustic side glass, ambient lighting, through-loading folding rear seat backs, and a 3-zone climate control system. There's loads of help for slotting this car into tight bays too. Not only all-round parking sensors and a reversing camera, but also a parking assistant which automatically steers you into spaces, and a reversing assistant which, when you return after parking up, can automatically reverse along whatever path you've previously taken forward. In addition, pretty much all the stuff you'd expect from a premium executive model is present and correct too. So you can tick off auto headlamps and wipers, power folding heated mirrors, an alarm, and LED illumination for the tail lamps and the front fog lamps, along with cruise control, an anti-dazzle rear view mirror, and the usual BMW driving experience driving mode setup, which is embellished with a track-focused Sport Plus setting. BMW has additionally standardised its lovely welcome light carpet, which illuminates the ground around the front doors when you get into the car or step out of it at night. Annoyingly though, a space-saver spare wheel isn't available, and run-flat tyres can't be had either. We mentioned the BMW Live Cockpit Professional arrangement earlier. Well, that's your portal for access to a portfolio of connectivity features on a completely different level to anything an M3 driver will have seen in the past. For a start, you get what BMW calls an intelligent personal assistant. And that works a bit like the Siri or Google Assistant features that you might use on your phone. And it's there to answer questions that you can voice to the car as you drive it. Plus, of course, there's 3D navigation, Bluetooth, and a high-quality DAB audio setup, part of a 16-speaker Harman Kardon hi-fi system. In addition, there's also 4G LTE connectivity, a Wi-Fi hotspot, wireless charging, and gesture control. Plus, you now, at last, with this car, get the brand's Apple Carplay and Android Auto smartphone integration system as standard without time limit, so you can easily use your favourite apps in the car. It's also worth knowing that the whole operating system 7.0 media setup can update itself over the air with remote upgrades, meaning that you'll get into your M3 one day and find that it's able to do something it couldn't do the day before, which is pretty cool. As brand loyalists would expect, this 6th generation M3 includes plenty of the brand's really clever digital connectivity features too, including the full suite of BMW connected package professional services. Things like real-time traffic information, which warns you of congestion along your chosen route, and connected parking, which offers multi-storey and on-street parking information in selected cities in the UK and Europe. There's also BMW's concierge service, which at the press of a button will give you direct access to an operator, and they'll be able to answer almost any question about your journey as you drive it. And the Connected Package Professional Pack now includes connected music, which offers unlimited streaming of millions of songs in the vehicle from Spotify. In-car experiences are one-shot cabin modes, able to instantly adapt the interior ambience to suit your mood. Plus, there's the company's suite of BMW vehicle apps, which gives you access to things like news reports, weather forecasts for up to 4 days ahead, and information on highway tolls. In addition, the system can remotely update itself with fresh features and mapping upgrades, and of course, it will read out your text messages to you too. We'll also mention teleservices, which can decide when a garage visit's required and automatically book it. And as a customer of this Munich maker, you'll get a 3-month trial of a connected teaser package, which gives you BMW music, and that allows you to export your favourite soundtracks into the car. If you've owned a BMW before, you might be familiar with the standard remote services package. Now, this allows you to control many aspects of your vehicle's operation via your smartphone. And you will maybe also recognise the downloadable My BMW app, which can learn your mobility routines, it can read your calendar, and even prompt you when to leave for scheduled journeys. It'll get familiar with your most frequently travelled routes, and it'll memorise those as future destinations. Plus, the app will also help you to find the car if you've gone and forgotten where you parked it. And it can also remotely lock or unlock the doors. That's enough on standard equipment. What about options? Well, most M3 customers spend plenty on extras, and the spec of this test car here certainly reflects that. It features the M Carbon Pack, which from launch cost a cool £6,750 and includes two main elements, both of which can be ordered individually. Firstly, there's an M Carbon Exterior Styling Pack, which adds carbon fibre to the front air outlets either side of the grille, as well as to the door mirrors, the rear spoiler and the rear diffuser. Secondly, and perhaps most controversially, the M Carbon Pack gets you BMW's race-style M Carbon bucket seats with their exaggerated side bolsters and extra support. That's great for Silverstone. It's not so good for suburbia. If you like the idea of these DTM-style chairs, we'd strongly suggest that you try them before you buy them. If you're going to be using this M3 on track, then you're also likely to want to blow another £8,000 on the M Pro Pack. This gives you M Carbon ceramic brakes with gold calipers, and the M Drivers Pack, which removes the standard 155 miles an hour speed limiter and increases top speed to 180 mph. The M Drivers Pack can be ordered separately for just over £2,000 more, which does seem a lot just to change a line of engine software, although the pack does also include Z-rated tyres and a voucher for BMW M Intensive Driver Training Session. The remaining three options packs are the same as you get on any normal 3 Series or 4 Series model. The Visibility Pack for £1,500 more gets you BMW's piercing blue-themed laser lights, which give a beam range of 600 metres. If you're tempted by them, then you'll probably also want the optional Technology Plus Pack, which for £1,750 more gets you the full contents of BMW's Driving Assistant Professional Camera Safety Package. Then we're going to cover that off for you when we come on to talk about safety. Otherwise, the Technology Plus package is all about parking. It includes BMW's Park Assistant Plus remote 3D view surround view camera system. The cameras for that are also employed in another clever feature. This is the brand's Drive Recorder. Now, this is like a dash cam, except it's a lot more sophisticated. The Drive Recorder uses inbuilt cameras to record video footage from different points all around the vehicle before storing the event and crash recordings so that they can be either watched later on the control display or exported via the USB port. Recordings can be up to 40 seconds in length. For accident playback, you get 20 seconds before the impact and then 20 seconds afterwards. Park Assistant Plus with the Drive Recorder system, they can be ordered separately too. If luxury is more your focus than technology, then there's a Comfort Pack, which for £990 more gives you Comfort Access keyless entry, including a powered boot lid you can activate with a wave of your foot beneath the bumper. Additionally, this pack includes steering wheel heating. That can also be ordered separately. Okay, on to aesthetic upgrades. Metallic paint standard. Here we've got oxide grey, but inevitably BMW also offers a range of more exclusive extra cost body shades. You can also spend more money on different wheel designs. For example, we've got the 825 series M double spoke Orbit grey matte alloy rims here with mixed tyres. The available stickier track tyres come shod on 826 series M bicolour black double spoke alloy rims. If you stuck with the standard M compound braking system as a no-cost option, you can have the calipers finished in blue or black if you don't like the standard red finish. As for the interior, well, there are optional carbon fibre trim inlays and there are various upholstery choices. Here we've stuck with the standard extended merino leather, but you can also switch to full merino leather for £1,700 more. If you want to switch away from standard black, then you can have the seating finished in ivory white for the same cost. Or for a little more, you can have it in brighter Fiona red and black. If you don't like any of those options, then with either extended merino leather or with full merino leather, there are bi-colour upholstery options. There's a relatively subdued Silverstone and black bi-colour package. Or for the extroverts, there's either Kyalami orange and black bi-colour, or a really quite garish Yast marina blue and black with yellow accents package. As for practical options, well, we'd want the luggage compartment mat and possibly the all-weather floor mats for muddier months. You might also like to add a tow bar, which would enable you to carry a rear bike carrier. And roof bars are available, which will enable you to add the optional black roof box. BMW additionally offers an advanced car eye dash cam, and as usual, it'd be wise to include BMW's optional TrackStar stolen vehicle tracking system. Okay, enough with standard kit and options. Let's go on to consider safety provision. BMW wants to assure us that this G80 series design is intrinsically very safe, thanks to a comprehensive passive safety concept, which features a super stiff passenger cell and highly resilient supporting structures. It also includes integrated safety electronics, which deploy the restraint systems in the right sequence at the optimum moment and with the required effect for the type and the severity of the collision. Of course, there are the usual trimmed front and side bags too, plus a driver's knee bag. As you expect, there are front and rear ISOFIX child seat fastenings and the usual electronic assistance for traction and stability control, primarily DSC Plus stability control and DTC traction control. There's a trailer stabilization function, which will stop trailer sway, and hill start assist, which stops you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. There's plenty of braking peace of mind too, with the ABS system supplemented by fading compensation, CBC, cornering brake control, and the neat brake drying system that keeps the discs free of moisture in wet weather. Panic stops are aided by a brake assist system and advertised to following motorists by dynamic brake lights that flash a bright warning. You also get an active bonnet to minimise injuries in the nightmare scenario of a pedestrian collision. And there's a multi-collision braking function too, which in the event of an impact with a solid object or another vehicle will keep brake pressure applied until you come to a complete stop. Tyre pressure monitoring is standard too. Another neat safety feature fitted as standard across the range is the Attentiveness Assistant, which monitors you for signs of drowsiness. We'll also highlight the standard BMW emergency call with teleservices system, which in an accident can automatically alert the emergency services. The system not only gives them your exact GPS location, but it also provides recovery personnel with information on your speed at point of impact, how hard the seat belts are pulled, how many airbags burst, and so on. So if you were to have a crash, it would all mean not only that the emergency teams would, of course, know exactly where you were, but also that they would arrive on the scene more prepared and more ready to get you to safety than they could ever otherwise be. A potentially life-saving difference. This setup has now been further enhanced to also automatically activate after low-speed collisions that are below the threshold for airbag deployment, immediately after the impact, flashing up an iDrive screen message offering to contact BMW's Accident Assistance Service directly. We should also mention that to meet current customer expectations, a full range of camera-driven safety features is included. It was long overdue for this model. The previous F80 generation version of this car was launched without any kind of autonomous braking system at all, and not much else in terms of camera safety kit either. This time around, BMW groups its main camera-driven safety features in the Active Guard Plus intelligent safety package, and this is familiar from other models. The key element of this is, as you might expect, autonomous braking, or as the Munich maker calls it, front collision warning with city braking. This system works as these kinds of setups usually do. At over 30 miles an hour, the vehicle scans the road ahead for potential accident hazards, and if one's detected, you'll be warned, and the brakes will be preconditioned for maximum effectiveness. If you are travelling at under 30 miles an hour and you're not responding to a detected hazard, then the brakes will automatically be applied, and that reduces the severity of any resulting accident, and hopefully it'll alleviate it altogether. There are two other standard Active Guard Plus features: lane departure warning with steering impulse, that alerts you if you cross lane delineating lines, and speed limit information, pictures road signs as you pass them and then displays them on the dash. If you want more in terms of camera-driven safety tech, you're going to have to stump up for the extra cost Driving Assistant Professional Pack. This has to be had as part of the Technology Plus package we mentioned earlier on. And that means that this enhanced safety pack isn't cheap. Still, it does include the choicest parts of BMW's safety, camera and autonomous driving technology, as you're just about to hear. The autonomous driving part of the Driving Assistant Professional Pack lies primarily with two elements. There's active cruise control with approach control. That's there to regulate your distance to the vehicle in front, and it's able, if necessary, to slow you right down to a stop and then to start you off again. It incorporates a radar-based approach control function which senses other traffic around you and can adapt throttle and brakes accordingly. But the real highlight of the optional Driving Assistant Professional Pack is BMW's now improved steering and lane control assistant, which takes its bearings from road markings and vehicles driving ahead using data from a trifocal camera and a front range radar. That enables it to work with the driver to help to centre the car in the detected lane with corrective steering input. The setup can then make corrective steering interventions at speeds of up to 130 miles an hour, although you still have to keep your hands on the wheel at all times. We've found that it works particularly well in heavy traffic, especially now that it's been updated to include the brand's latest active navigation tech. Now, this system uses navigation data to spot in advance when a lane change will be required. In preparation, the system will automatically adjust the car's speed to make it easier to steer into a suitable gap in the adjacent lane. We mentioned that the Driving Assistant Professional Pack also includes the whole suite of BMW's latest camera safety tech. So let's brief you on that. There's active lane guidance, which adds subtle steering lock to ease you back to where you ought to be if the lane departure warning system that we mentioned earlier on detects that you've inadvertently veered over carriageway delineating lines. In addition, as part of this extra cost pack, you also get BMW's lane keeping assistant with active side collision protection package. Now, this incorporates side collision warning and lane change warning, all of which stops you from pulling out when there's a vehicle in your blind spot, and it adds in light steering intervention that will ease you back to where you ought to be on the road should you drift offline. We also like the pack's crossing traffic warning front feature, which alerts you to oncoming vehicles if you're trying to edge out of a junction and you can't completely see traffic coming at you from either side. There's also automatic speed limit assist, and that works with the traffic sign recognition system to recognise speed limits and prevent you from exceeding them. We haven't finished yet either. The Driving Assistant Professional Pack also includes an evasion aid, which gives you extra steering assistance in critical situations where it's still possible to avoid an accident. Say, for example, someone suddenly pulls out in front of you, or you suddenly have to make a dramatic lane change to avoid slow-moving traffic. Plus, there's crossroads warning that incorporates give way warning, which alerts you to traffic coming at you from the sides at a crossroads. And finally, as the name suggests, wrong way warning makes an enormous fuss if you forget yourself and end up going the wrong way down a one-way street. It's all very reassuring. Elsewhere in this film, we've talked about the fact that as well as being the fastest M3 ever made, this G80 series model is also by some margin the heaviest. Enthusiasts disapprove of this, of course, most of them probably the same people who disapproved of the 4th generation E90 series V8 model back in 2007 for the same reason. A car that is now almost universally adored amongst the M3 cognoscenti and commonly stripped out for track use. In a few decades' time, we've little doubt that the 6th generation design here will be equally sought after, but for the time being, it has to sell in the cold, hard light of a post-pandemic automotive world obsessed by the kind of electrified technology that continues to pass this model by. and there's a penalty to pay for that. BMW's efficient dynamics technology does its best here with features like electromechanical power steering, auto stop start, brake energy regeneration, and on-demand control of engine ancillary components. But the fact remains that the WLTP rated drive efficiency stats of this Mark VI M3 really belong to another era. This rear-driven model manages 27.7 mpg on the combined cycle and 234 grams per kilometre of CO2. For the X-Drive version, the figures are up to 28.2 mpg and 228 grams per kilometre. These kinds of readings may give some browsing buyers cause for concern, particularly if these people happen to compare them to the figures which are delivered by the car that will offer this G80 series model its stiffest sales competition throughout its production life. That's similarly performing Mercedes-AMG C63, which uses a 4-cylinder hybrid engine mating combustion power with an electric motor. Even to get anywhere near the figures that we've just quoted, you'll have to drive with considerable restraint, with the engine in its efficient M menu setting and the center console M mode button set into its most sensible road format. You can monitor just how much high octane fuel you're using via a graphical readout provided in the central screen's journey data section. That's part of a driving information section, which also has an energy flow graphic. But of course, as an M3 owner, that's the last thing you'll want to do. Drive this car in anger as it was meant to be driven, and the figures that we've given you will of course disappear in a haze of high octane. And if you use your right boot in anger a good percentage of the time, then you'll certainly chew through consumables like tyres and brake pads. Plus, the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres will be fearsomely expensive to replace, so bear that in mind before you go experimenting for too long on track days with the M Drift Analyzer. What else? Well, in the vehicle status section of the centre dash screen, there's a general check control, which allows you to monitor the status of various vehicle functions. Plus, there are separate screens which allow you to specifically oversee things like tyre pressure and also the current levels of engine oil. You can check the service requirements too, and you can use a clever teleservices feature which comes as part of the BMW connected drive services, which you can access through the iDrive infotainment system. Via this, before each service appointment is due, your M3 can automatically put in a teleservices call to your nominated BMW service centre, and that's complete with detailed information on vehicle condition. You'll then get a call from the service centre to arrange a service appointment, and that's something that you'll have already budgeted for if at the point of original purchase you opted for one of the two fixed cost service inclusive or service inclusive plus packages. Now, these cover you for 5 years or 50,000 miles. With these, after a one-off payment, you'll have the peace of mind of knowing that all the normal work on your car has been paid for during that period. And that includes items like oil, spark plugs and filters. What else might you need to know? Well, based on the Band K CO2 figure, your vehicle excise duty will cost £1,345 for the first year you run the car, then £490 a year for the second, third, fourth and fifth years of ownership. So budget for that when you're working out how much you can afford to blow on extras. Residual value should be strong. The M3 has historically performed slightly better than its Mercedes-AMG C63, Audi Rs4 and Alfa Romeo Giulia Quattrofoglio rivals in that regard. Onto the warranty package. BMW's warranty only lasts for 3 years, but it includes an emergency breakdown service, and at least it isn't mileage limited. That's unlike the comparable package that you get as standard with the rival Audi. You can of course extend the warranty with either monthly or annual payments. There is also a 3-year paint warranty and the usual 12-year anti-corrosion guarantee. As for insurance, well, you're looking at Group 41E for this rear-driven model and 42E for the X-Drive variant. Without doubt, this 6th generation M3 is the most accomplished member of this long, iconic model line. That doesn't mean it'll be the most sought after or fondly remembered design in the M3 portfolio, of course. Purists won't like the fact that, for our market at least, manual transmission is unavailable, and they'll disparage the option of all-wheel drive. These, of course, were the same people who dismissed the first full M car to go all-drive and all-auto, the current M5, which today is arguably the best performance machine that the Munich manufacturer now makes. But perhaps now this G80 Series M3 is more deserving of that title. Even with all-wheel drive fitted, you can customise the drivetrain for tail-out antics on the track, but also enjoy its outstanding X-Drive traction in all weathers on the road. For decades, the M3 has been a car you could only fully enjoy on the public highway for a portion of the year. That's changed now. Plus, there's a fresh level of interior luxury to cosset you when there's no need for speed. Inevitably, greater luxury and technology carries with it the penalty of greater weight. This G80 series model is 170 kilos heavier than its F80 series predecessor, and we can't help wondering how good it might be without that extra weight. Perhaps a future track-style variant of this car might show us. Or, of course, there's always the BMW M2. What's delivered here, though, is perhaps the ultimate combination of M5 maturity and M2 agility, which leaves us with what? Well, quite simply this, the most complete M3 ever made.